How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Zone Defense. I'm Drew, joined by my co-host Chris. Unfortunately, our other host Ryan could not be here today because he was having some connection issues due to the storm we had last night. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Instagram at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. Today, Chris and I are going to debate the top 10 most overrated NBA players for this season. It should be a lot of fun conversation. And Chris, do you want to add anything before you jump into your number 10 guy?
Yeah, just I did a ton of research on these guys. I had to make a lot of edits to my list throughout the night and this morning, and I'm really excited to get into it. I'm sure we're gonna have a lot of spirited debates here. I'm really excited to hear some of the names you got on your list, and I'm definitely gonna disagree with some of them. I'm sure.
Yeah, there's some definite guys here that I know that people are really, really high on. So please be kind in the comment section, even if you disagree with some of our takes. But Chris, why don't you take it away with your number 10 guy?
Oh God, I'm coming out with a bang here. This is a player that I have, even in our other podcasts, I've had some, I've had some hate for him in the past, but I've kind of softened my opinion on him a little bit. This isn't quite as bold of a take as I used to have because I left him off my top 10 list before. It's James Harden for me at the number 10 overrated player. I know Drew's gonna disagree with me, but that's fine. You can disagree with me. He barely made my list for a reason because I've kind of like I said, I've kind of softened my stance on him. He's still one of the best offensive players in the league, definitely in the top five in that, probably even further ahead. But he's just so bad defensively. He's not super efficient offensively. It's going to be kind of the story of my whole list. Is a lot of inefficient players on offense, but he's a very good free throw shooter, and I feel like that's kind of a pro and a con for his game because he's not, like I said, he's not crazy efficient in the rest of his game, but he's so good at getting to the line, so it kind of boosts his stats a little bit as well, and puts him into that upper echelon of scoring. And again, like I said, he's at number 10 for a reason. He barely made the list for me, and I probably could have had him at 1 if it was like 3 or 4 months ago because I really was hating on him a while ago. But I've kind of softened that stance a tiny bit.
Yeah, this was a thing that we got into a really heated argument a few months ago towards the beginning of the season.
Oh yeah,
Um, but I just disagree. I don't think Harden's overrated because all the takes that you just said are like everyone says them about him. And I think all of his deficiencies are very well talked about, and it makes him perfectly rated, in my opinion. Like, yeah, is he the best defender? No. I honestly think he's a little bit underrated defensively. I'm not saying he's a good
oof,
defender, but I'm saying that he's not as bad as people like say he is now. Like, of course, when he first got to Houston and he became kind of like that star alpha dog guy, yeah, he was really brutal on defense. And if you don't believe me, just look at some of the video on YouTube of him just like not doing anything on defense. But look at these last few seasons, his defensive. I'm looking at some advanced stats here because that's how seriously I'm taking this. But look at his defensive win shares; they've gone up. Look at his defensive
they
box
have.
plus minus. They've consistently been in that 1.6 range, which again isn't great. But when you look at how it was at the beginning of his career, especially his first few years in Houston, it's a lot better than it was.
Yep.
And offensively, of course, I think he's the best isolation guy in the game. He's averaged over 30 points each of the last 3 seasons, counting this season in 2020. Yeah, he doesn't play well in the playoffs, but again, I feel like that's very well documented. So
Yeah, it is. But I
I
think some people, kind of where I disagree with you, I guess, is like I feel like a lot of people kind of start to edge him into the top five discussion in terms of actual players. I believe Ryan had him as his number 4 player overall, which I disagree with that. I think he's in that tier 2, tier 3 group where he's kind of in the back end of the top 10, maybe sneaking into the teens for some people. I think I have him around 9 or 10 in my overall player list. So I think that makes him a little bit overrated when you have a decent amount of the NBA community ranking him inside the top 6, which I just don't think he's there because yes, he does his playoff production definitely goes down, and I think that's a big factor as well. I didn't even bring that up.
Yeah, if you look at his usage rate too, it's through the roof as well. But there's a
Right.
lot of star players that have a high usage rate, and I mean, he's able to produce, and he's also not a bad distributor. His assists have gone down in recent years. He was at 11 in 16, 17, but that's steadily gone down, and now he's at 7, about 7.5 for this season. So I do think you're kind of right there that he is a little bit overrated in how like good of a distributor he is. Because
Right, me
a lot of
too.
people are like, oh, he's a point guard, he's a good point guard, but seven
He's
and
a
a half
turnover
assists.
machine
I
too.
mean, that's pretty good for a point guard, I guess. But also, you mentioned you just mentioned it. The turnovers are a serious concern as well. And he shoots. I mean, this year he's shooting about 35% from three, which isn't
Which is
great.
average.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
average.
terrible, but it's not great. A lot of people
Right.
think he's just like an amazing 3 point shooter. But I think you also have to mention how he gets to the free throw line. I mean, averaging almost 12 free throw attempts a game, and he makes about 10 of them. So I mean, that's
He
pretty
sure
good.
does. Yeah, it
Uh,
definitely is. So I think we're kind of on the same page there. I know you like him a little bit more than I do. I've kind of like I said, I've kind of like decreased my hate for him lately. I've kind of done a little more research and dove in. Yeah, he has been a little bit better defensively. He's still a very bad defender. I'm not going to change my opinion on that, but he's gotten a little bit better in that regard. So I think he's just a little bit overrated, and that's why he's number 10. But let's get into your number 10 guy, Drew, before we linger too much on Harden.
Yeah. So before I mention my number 10 guy, I need to mention this guy because that if we had a top 11, he would hands down be my 11th guy. And I really wanted to put him in my top 10, but I just couldn't because he's a lesser name. But it's Alex Caruso. I mean, this guy, he's on the Lakers, and
Oh, jeez.
he'd be like some no name backup on literally any other team in the NBA. But now Alex Caruso, he makes one dunk, and it's literally on ESPN, Slam magazine. It is everywhere, and it's like, dude, like this guy. Yeah, is he balding? Does he look kind of funny when he dunks? Yes, and it's kind of funny. But does it really need to be broadcast on every major basketball news network? I mean, this is a guy. If you had no idea about basketball and you just read media coverage and you just see Alex Caruso, Alex Caruso, Alex Caruso, you'd think he's like a 15 point per game score at least. Maybe he's the next Dwayne Wade, kind of like the Wade to LeBron, kind of how it was back in Miami. But this guy, he's averaging 5 points a game this year. One, not even two assists, not even two rebounds. It's like, yes, he has some nice dunks once in a while. Is he kind of a walking meme? Yes, but I don't know. It ticks me off how much media coverage this guy gets because he's not good at all. Like he's just a backup player. But all right, I'm sorry to go on that tangent, but I had to mention Alex Caruso when we were talking about overrated players because he was one of the first guys that popped in my head when we decided to do this episode. Um, so my actual number 10 guy, which was the second guy that instantly popped in my head when I thought about overrated players, it's a little bit of a lesser known guy. So Chris, I'm assuming he might not be on your list, but it's Aaron Gordon for me. I mean, you look at a lot of people regard
Okay.
him as like one of the best power forwards in the league. He gets paid like one of them. He got a kind of big contract extension. He's expecting to get paid like them. But look at his stats. I mean, he averaged 17 and 8 in the was it 16 or 17-18 season. And outside of that, though, he hasn't topped 16 points per game. Not great. He's kind of hovered around that 7 rebounds a game territory. Isn't a great defensive player. Isn't a great assist guy. But the way people talk about him is like he's like the future of the Magic, and he's like a really
Right.
legitimate star in this league. And it's like he's just kind of a decent fourth option. And it wouldn't surprise me if down the stretch he gets on a decent team here and is more of like a sixth man kind of guy. But I think because he's a really good dunker, and people think that he's a lot better than he really is.
Yeah, so on Aaron Gordon, I actually see. I thought you were going to go really off the radar here because I actually have a couple guys that are probably even maybe one guy that's lower than him in terms of name value. But Aaron Gordon would have been my 11th guy, so you were not far off at all there. This is actually one we're going to agree on. I do think he is. I do think he's a little bit overrated as well. For him, he's not a terrible offensive player, but I feel like we just kind of know what he is at this point. Like he's going to score 15 to 18 points a game. He's going to get a few rebounds here and there. He's not a good passer, like you said, not a very good defender. He's a decent shooter, not great in
Yeah,
that regard, but yeah, his dunk ability definitely gets him overrated, and he's going to get a massive contract somewhere. I don't know if the Magic are going to pay him, but someone's going to pay him, and he's going to overpay him because it's going to be one of the worst contracts in the league, no matter because it's going to be north of 25 mil most likely, which is out. I would not pay that man $25 million. So I'm just kind of projecting that his contract is going to be really overrated, like really overwhelming for the kind of player he is. Just kind of like a third or fourth option.
yeah, and I think a big reason why he's gonna get that such a large contract is because I think he thinks that he's like a lot better than he really is. Of course, I don't know Aaron Gordon
Oh
personally,
yeah,
so I might be completely wrong. But just judging by the way he carries himself, he thinks he's like
yeah,
a top
yeah.
10
That's
power
very
forward,
true.
and that just rubs me the wrong way. And I think that causes some people to be like, man, Aaron Gordon, he's actually pretty good. But really, I mean, confidence is key, but confidence can only get you so far. And um, I completely agree with you. I think he's going to get overpaid, and I don't think he's worth that amount of money. And even if you look at his minutes per game, they've steadily gone up, and that's kind of led to his stats increasing. And I
Yeah,
think if he got less minutes per game, you can say about everybody. If you got less minutes per game, I think it really wouldn't equal. It really wouldn't amount to that much more in terms of his production. So, but yeah, Aaron
yeah, I
Gordon was like the first guy that
100%
popped in
agree.
my head. How
Yeah,
about you
yeah,
take us
that's
to
definitely it was an early name. You want me to go into my number 9 guy now?
yes? How about you go into your number 9 guy? Unless you had
Sorry
any
about
other
that.
thoughts.
Yeah, yeah, I was just gonna say that he was also like a very early name. He was actually the first guy I wrote down. It wasn't the first guy I thought about, the first guy I wrote down kind of at the top, just guys to think of for my list. But I'll jump in my number 9 guy. I'd say this is one of the better players on my list, but I think this is a guy that gets he's I feel like the amount he's overrated is kind of underrated in the community. I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but it's Trey Young for me. I think he's a very good offensive player. Okay, Drew's thumbs up. He means that I had a good selection here. Maybe I even had him a little too low on my list, but yeah, he's objectively the worst defender in the NBA. He is. I was looking up at a bunch of advanced metrics. He is last in a lot of different categories in terms of point guards. He's horrendous on the perimeter. Yeah, he's obviously small. He just gets bullied by basically any other point guard. And he's also very good offensively. I'll give him credit there. He was a top 5 player in offensive efficiency this year, and but you kind of have to look at his how much his team sucks. You know, Atlanta, they're terrible. I know they're kind of rebuilding, but they have some young, promising pieces in John Collins. I felt like they should have been a little better, and I think I had him as a borderline playoff contender this year, but they just weren't that at all. I know it had to do with John Collins going down with the I think he had the suspension this year, but Trey Young wasn't able to lead the team quite as well as I thought, and I just think people think he's just an unreal point guard, and he's already like taken the league by storm. But I don't even think he's even close. I think he's a really good point guard, but he's not even close to that elite level. He's probably in the back half of my top 10 in that regard.
Yeah, so he's on my list too. And I ranked my list a little bit differently. I kind of just named it, ordered it like in number of like how big the guy's name was, and he's, in my opinion, at least, he's the third biggest name on my list. And
Hmm.
I pretty much for every reason that you just mentioned. I mean, we have to remember this is still a second year, so I think he has potential to be a really, really kind of
Right.
top tier point guard. But you're right, the way people talk about him right now, like they're already putting him with like Steph Curry and Russell Westbrook and like the Chris Paul, even Chris Paul, like those top tier point guards of the league. And I just don't think he's there. I mean, he is a full on liability on defense. I mean, his defensive
Yeah.
box plus minus both of his first 2 years is negative over -2, which is not great,
Oh
not what
wow.
you want.
That's bad.
Uh, of course, his offensive, he's amazing offensively, right? I mean, he averaged what 29.6 points per game this year, almost 10 assists a game, 4 rebounds. But he's a point guard. He's a short point guard. You got to take that into account. But again, I kind of go back to what you said. The Hawks suck, and someone's got to score on the Hawks. He's got a really high usage rate. Believe he's fourth in usage rate.
Yep.
So that's kind of equates to him having a high scoring average. So it'll be interesting to see like once he is on a good team if he can still put up these stats and leads to wins. But right now these are just classic empty calorie stats, and the fact that he was a All Star starter this year is just ridiculous. So
It's,
um,
yeah, it's stupid. Yeah, I'm glad we're on the same page here. I feel like we haven't been besides maybe Harden a little bit, but you seem to kind of agree with me on that a tiny bit. We've been pretty much on the same page so far, so I'm excited to hear your number 9 guy right now.
all right, my number 9 guy is a little bit lesser known name again. He's still a point guard though, and it's Jamal Murray for me. I think a lot of people feel like that he is like
Mhm.
this elite level point guard, going to lead the Nuggets back to the promised land. I mean, he's still really young. He's only 22. This is his fourth year in the league, and he has kind of steadily improved a little bit, but he's really just a scorer. I mean, you look at his points averages the last couple years, 18 points a game, both seasons. Assists, he's had 4.8, exactly 4.8 assists last year and this year. And he's not really that great of a rebounder. He's a good shooter, but even that, I mean, he's only around that 35% range, which is about league average. And a lot of people think he's like this legit, like amazing 3-point shooter, which also isn't great. So I think he's not a bad player. And kind of like Trey Young, he's still really young, so he has the potential to be really good. But the way people talk about him right now is that he's this top tier point guard, shooting guard. But honestly, I think if he was on a good team or a team that maybe had a better option at point guard, he'd just be a shooting guard and be like a second or third option on a good team. And that's I
Yeah.
think he's just a little bit overrated in that regard.
Yeah, Jamal Murray is he's on my list. I'll just kind of touch up on it, but I'm not going to spoil every point I made. I agree with basically everything you said there. He's a player that is a very good scorer, doesn't do anything else remote, like, or not remotely though. Just kind of he's kind of a mediocre player in basically every other category. He's not a true point guard in my opinion. He's kind of a combo guard, which makes it tough. But him and Young, I see a lot of a lot of similarities between those two in terms of what kind of player they are. Really good offensively. I mean, I wouldn't say Jamal Murray is really good offensively, but he's solid offensively, and then not very good defensively, and not really good at a lot of other things, I guess.
Yeah, he's slightly better defensively than Trey Young, but he's still got a negative defensive box plus
Yeah,
minus,
yeah,
and offensive box, he's nowhere near as good as, and offensive win shares nowhere near as good as Trey Young. Because as I said, Trey Young's averaging almost 30 points a game this year. Even though it's kind of empty calorie stats, it's still really good. And Jamal Murray, I mean, he's like the second option really on that Denver team that is one of the best teams in the West. But it kind of makes me think that maybe if they had a better guy in Murray's position, maybe the Nuggets would be an even better team. Because Murray, I mean, he hasn't improved that much. And that's
right.
kind of the theme for a lot of the guys on my list, or a few other guys at least, that they really just haven't improved. And I think you got to take that into account. And I think people are expecting him to be a lot more than he just really is. And that's not really his fault, I guess,
Right.
but this is an overrated list. And in my opinion, fans and media kind of overrate him a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm going to jump into my next name, and I've already done some switching around with my list. I'm trying to coordinate it with yours as well. Not exactly how you did it, because you said you went in order of names, but this guy is my smallest name on the list, so I don't really want to. I had him down at 5, but I moved him all the way up to 8. This is a guy that kind of took the league by storm. He's on a really bad team. He had a really good start to the year, and he kind of fell off, and people still think he's pretty good. I don't think anyone's saying that he's like an awesome player, but he's definitely, like, a lot of people think he's a decent starter at point guard. It's Devonte Graham for me, and I don't know if Drew's got him anywhere near his list or even considered him, but he's a player that's super inefficient. I think I saw a stat where he had the 12th most missed shots, even though he was 27th in shots attempted. That's just efficiency that I can't ignore here. Yeah, he was up at 5 for a reason here. I just moved him down just because he was just a much smaller name than any of these other guys on my list in that regard, and his usage percentage is up there and towards the top of the league. Guys like Trey Young, he's right around that Trey Young, James Harden amount, and he's just not the same player as him. He averages like 18 points a game, which isn't horrible, but he's a really bad defender. He doesn't really do anything else well besides. I mean, you can call him a good scorer, but he's really not. He's just super inefficient. And like I said, that's going to be kind of the story of my whole list. It's a lot of inefficient guard play on my list towards the top. Not to spoil too much, but there's a lot of those names kind of on this list.
Yeah, he wasn't on my list. I considered possibly having him on my list, but pretty much for exactly the reason that you said, was how he got off to a really great start to the year, and then he just kind of fell apart kind of down the stretch. And I think that a lot of that equates to why he's got some really good numbers, which, I mean, he's 18-8, which isn't bad for a
Not
point
bad.
guard.
No.
And he's almost 40, he's 37% from three, almost 40%. I mean, that's pretty good. That's better than guys like Harden and Trey Young. But I don't know. In my opinion, I feel like people kind of, it seems like the greater media and fans are kind of in agreement that he just got to a really hot start and he's not
Yeah,
a
I think
great
so
point
too.
guard. So I kind of see where we're coming there. But I actually, since we're talking Charlotte Hornets guards here real quick, I just want to mention Terry Rozier is a little bit
Yeah,
overrated when you look at that contract.
yeah, he
Um,
is.
I'm not sure if you have him on your list, but if you do, we can talk about it a little bit later. And then one of the honorable mention guys that I actually had was Malik Monk. He's a shooting guard,
Oh wow.
still an insanely young guy. I know it's kind of like a, maybe some people haven't even heard of who Malik Monk is, but every year, I swear to God, it's like I read this article or listen to this podcast about like this is going to be Malik Monk's breakout season, and it's like every year for the last like 2 or 3 years, and it's like this guy. I mean, he's averaging like 8 points a game every year, and he's still really
Right.
young, and that's how like a lot of these guys on the list. But the way people talk about him, it's like he's just not that good in my opinion. But
No.
that whole Charlotte Hornets backcourt, I think the fact that they're just not great, and the whole team as a whole is not great. And someone's got to score, and those three guys scored a decent amount or are moderately exciting, and that's why people think, oh, if they were on another team, they'd be
Yeah.
just as good. But if they were on another team, they'd be backups at best. So
Right. I kind of addressed your points there on Rozier. He's not on my list, but it was a guy I thought of as well. I didn't write him anywhere. I wasn't really in consideration, but he's definitely overrated. Malik Monk, I just don't think he's that good. I know people do kind of talk about him like that, but I don't know if I consider him overrated when he's just not a very good player. And I don't think he's going to be a very good player. I think he's going to be out of the league in a few years. I'm not really optimistic on his chances.
Well, I remember, I think the Pistons almost drafted him. Of course, we're Pistons fans. The Pistons almost drafted
Yep.
him, and then they almost traded for him too. And people were like, "Oh man, we get Malik Monk in here.
Yep.
Here we go." And it's like, dude, he's an 8 point per game scorer. Like, can we calm down? Anyway,
Right.
I can jump into my number 8 pick here. This guy, I
Yeah, let's hear
believe
it.
we have talked about him being overrated before. So I hope that you might be in agreement here. It's on one of your favorite teams, arguably the second biggest name on that team, and that's CJ McCollum for me. The way people talk about him is that he's this amazing shooting guard and like a top 10, top 5 kind of guy. But you look at the stats, I mean, he scores over 20 points a game. But again, I go back to he really hasn't improved. I mean, he really broke out on the scene there when he became the starting shooting guard in 2015, 2016. But since then, he's averaged between 20 to 23 points per game every year. He really hasn't improved that much. Doesn't really offer a whole lot in assists. His career high in assists is 4.3, not great. Total rebounds, career high is 4.1, not great. 3 point percentage, he has gone over 40% a couple times, but right now he's at 38%, which is still really good. Um, but the way people talk about him, he's just not as good. And I think he benefits from having Damian Lillard being there, and he gets a lot of open shots. And he's able to create on his own, which is nice. But he's just a scorer, and people kind of treat him like he's in that Klay Thompson shooting guard tier, and he's just not.
Yeah, I don't. He is not on my list, but if I had probably a top 15 list, he would be on there. I've thought about it a little bit. I've kind of softened my stance on him as well. I don't really like CJ McCollum, even though I love the Blazers because I just love Lillard. But he's a good player. He's not great. I don't think he's a superstar, but I think people are kind of starting to realize that. He's a 20 points per game scorer. I think he's better than some of these inefficient guys on this list. He's not a better player than Trae Young, obviously, but like you know what I mean. Like he's not quite as inefficient. Like you said, he's a pretty good 3 point shooter, so he definitely has that. But he also gets a lot of open shots because Lillard just demands a double team basically every time down the court. And McCollum he's a good second like option, I guess I'd say. Like with a good when they become healthy again next year, I think this is going to be another team that can compete for a top 5 seed in the West. I think this is going to be still a really good team, and I think he's still a very good second option. But he doesn't really offer much else in terms of defense, and he's an all right passer. He's probably league average in terms of that. He's not the greatest defender either. So yeah, I like the pick here for sure. At 8, that's a good spot for him. I don't have him quite as low, but he'd be on my top 15 list.
Yeah, I the defense just isn't there, and like I said, he just doesn't do a whole lot offensively aside from score. But still, 20 points per game is really good. And as we saw last year in the playoffs, he was pretty good and helped the Blazers reach that Western Conference Finals,
Right.
which is you got to note that as well. That's why he's a little bit lower. And I do agree. I think the stance around him is starting to soften up a little bit because this is just who he
Yes.
is. 20 point per game scorer, doesn't do a whole lot else. I think he's a decent like the Blazers are a decent team, so he's a second option. I think if like the Blazers were like a top tier, good level team, I think he'd be like a third option. So
Yeah, I
that's
agree
that's
with
that's
that
how
for
I believe, and
sure.
I think the stance around him is improving a little bit. But how about you jump into your next guy?
All right, so at number 7, this is another guy I moved down my board a little bit just because he's not quite as fun of a name to talk about, but it's Andre Drummond for me. As a Pistons fan, I'm not a big fan of him. He's one of the best rebounders. I would say, I would argue of all time when it's all said and done, he's going to be considered one of the best rebounders. But literally at everything else, he's average to below average for me. I don't think he's a good passer. He's not a good scorer. He just clogs up the whole paint. He takes up a lot of space. I'd say he's an average rim protector. He's not horrible, but he's not great either. He gets a decent amount of blocks, but I don't think his positioning is that well. And he's obviously a liability. He can't shoot. He can't shoot from the line. And I don't think he's a very good teammate. And he also doesn't bring his effort all the time. So I think this is a guy that is I think the stance is kind of starting to soften on him as well because I think a lot of people are starting to see what he is and like the Pistons literally couldn't get anything for him. They got 2 expiring contracts and a couple second round picks. Like you'd expect Drummond if you would have told me they traded Drummond away, I would have expected a first round pick a couple years ago, or at least a first round pick plus more. Even though I still thought he was overrated back then, he was considered a little bit more highly by the rest. He was regarded more highly by the rest of the league, but now I just don't think he is anymore, and I think he is overrated.
Yeah, kind of like you were saying with CJ McCollum, he wasn't on my list, but if it was like a top 15, Drummond definitely would have been on there. He made my honorable mentions list
Right.
for pretty much every reason that you just said. I mean, people think that he's a star player in this league because he's a really good center, but the fact of the matter is just this just not isn't a league for centers anymore, and he's kind of a casualty of that. I think if he came
Right.
around in like the early 2000s and in the 90s especially, I think he'd be one of the best players in the league because he is really
Yeah.
good at rebounding. And I think he'd be a little bit more motivated, but he's just not a good shooter. Defensively, I know he gets some blocks because he's big, but his defensive blocks plus minus is under one pretty much every year of his career. Doesn't have
Not
a
great.
ton of defensive win shares. He had a couple of years there where he was pretty good defensively,
He's
but
not terrible. I'd say he's an average league average
yeah,
center at
it's
defense. But
just
people think he's like a top center. He's nowhere near that.
it's just because of the effort. Like I think if he brought it more,
Right.
I think he'd easily be a top defensive player. Like a lot of people think
Me
he
too.
he he is and he should be. But it's just the effort is just never there. And like we said before, we're Pistons fans, so we saw it all the time. So
All right,
um,
jump in here. Yeah.
yeah, so this is actually I've gotten to many arguments about this guy in my time as a basketball fan.
Mhm.
It's another former Piston like Andre Drummond. I'm interested to see where you feel about this, Chris. But it's Chris Middleton, same name as you, Chris, spelled a little bit differently. But um, kind of the same thing with CJ McCollum is like, yeah, Middleton kind of broke out this year. He made an All Star team, averaged 21 points a game. But look at the rest of the numbers. He's only got 6 rebounds, only 4 assists, not great. Look at the advanced stats. He's like not great defensively. Like he's not awful, but not he's pretty
He's like
like average.
average, I'd say.
Yeah. Offensively, like I said, this year he's kind of broken out, but outside of this season, he really hasn't been great offensively in terms of like win shares and stuff like that. And I just think people treat him like he's a like McCollum, like he's a top tier, top level shooting guard. If he was a number one option on a team, he could lead you to the promised land. But it's like people are talking about Middleton in the same breath as guys like Bradley Beal, and I'm like, he's playing with
Oh yeah,
Giannis.
no.
He's playing with Giannis. Like that, he gets open shots and he's above 40% this year for 3 point percentage. So
He's a
you
very
can't
good shooter.
you can't ignore that. But he's just a scorer, and I think he's a good second or third option on a really good team like Milwaukee, like we're seeing this year. But the way people talk about him, like he's a star player, I think if Giannis wasn't there, I don't think we would refer to him as highly or think of him as highly as we do right now. And the fact that he's made two All Star teams, I get the East is bad, but I don't like him.
See, all right, I'll kind of jump into my take on Chris Middleton because this is a guy I will say I considered him on my list, but he did not really like get a real like he was someone I thought of kind of read about. I was like Chris Middleton, would he make my list? No, but I do think he's a little bit. I do think he's a little bit overrated. So like it's not an outlandish take. It's probably the one I disagree with you the most so far, but it's not something that like I'm fully off board. I guess I think he's gotten a lot better this year. I think the All Star game votes were definitely well deserved. I think he had a really good season this year. But yeah, before this, I would have probably agreed with you more. He would have been very close to making my list. But now I think he is starting to kind of blossom into that a really good second option. I agree. He's not some superstar player. He's not Bradley Beal. Don't get me wrong. That's maybe the most underrated player in the NBA. So if we ever do a list, expect him towards the top for me. But Chris Middleton is kind of a guy I've kind of another guy I've kind of loosened my stance on. I think he's a really solid player, not a superstar, but definitely a good second option for a good team like Milwaukee.
Yeah, the All Star game thing just kind of ticks me off a little bit because I feel like it should be the best players that go. And Middleton, let's be honest, made the team because the Milwaukee's so good. And I mean, you got to take that into account, right? Good players
Yeah, that's
win
fair.
games, and good players are on good teams. That's why they're good teams. But um, you look at some other guys that maybe didn't make it, like even Zach Levine. I mean, look at empty calorie stats, stuff like that. Yes, but if you look at pure talent, I think Zach Levine is better than Chris Middleton. But that's just my opinion. But I feel like Zach Levine might be on Chris's list, so I guess we'll get into that a little bit later. But that's my
No
stance on
comment.
Chris Middleton. I've gotten into a lot of arguments about Chris Middleton over the years because a lot of people think, "Oh man, he's a top shooting guard," and I'm like, no. Maybe part of me is just bitter because the Pistons literally gave him up for Brandon Jennings, and he was just kind of a throw-in, which still leaves a bad taste in my mouth all these years
Yeah.
later. Um, but I don't know. he's lower on my list because he's not a super big name, and I do think he's really kind of broken out this year as a legitimate 3 point shooting threat and a really good scorer. But he's not in that top tier of shooting guards in my opinion.
See that's fair to say for sure. Kind of touching on what you said about Middleton getting traded, I think another reason why I don't consider him to be overrated is because he was just such he was nothing a few years ago, and now he's blossomed into a really good, like a really solid player. So it's he's kind of a feel good story in terms of the NBA because he was someone that was virtually an unknown guy while he was with Detroit. And once he went to the Bucks, he kind of took him a few years, but he really blossomed to a solid player. So I like him a little bit more. Again, like I said, I've softened my stance on him as time has gone on, but I'm gonna go ahead and jump into my number 6 guy, and it's Jamal Murray here. Same as Drew. I definitely agree with you on that. He's definitely not worth a max contract to me at all. He is well overpaid, and that's a big reason why. And like you said, he's only a 35% 3 point shooter, which is league average. I always consider him as like a to be a really really good shooter for some reason. So I guess I would say maybe I even overrate him a little bit because I'm like, man, this guy is just such a good shooter, and yeah, he can pop off every once in a while. He can get really hot. He's one of the more fun players to watch when he's on fire because he's really hard to stop. But he's not that good of a shooter. He's very league average in that regard. And I think he's a below average defender as well. And like I said, not insanely efficient.
Yeah, I'm not going to go too in depth because I went in depth a little bit earlier on my
Yeah.
thoughts on Murray, but yeah, he's inefficient. He's a really good shooter in 2K, which I know this isn't a 2K
Oh yeah, he's a
two
beast
K
in
thing, but
2K.
he's a
That's for
beast in
sure.
2K. And like
Yeah,
you
he
said too,
is.
he's
He's money in 2K.
when he gets going, he's one of the most exciting players in the NBA, in my opinion. It's just that when he just doesn't get going as much as people think he does, and I think
Yeah,
that kind of leads
right.
into him being overrated a little bit because you see the potential, it just hasn't reached it yet. And I mean,
He's just
like I think
inconsistent.
he's super young. Like he's 22, like I said earlier. Um, so I think he maybe eventually, I think likely eventually he'll reach that kind of top tier. The people that the kind of the people, the guy that people think he is right now. I think eventually he'll reach that. But right now he isn't that for me because he's not as good of a shooter and. Even not as good of a scorer. I mean, I was surprised when I was doing this and I found out that he was below 20 points a game. I thought, oh, he's
Yeah,
easily 20 points a game. The way people talk about him.
right. I know he gets. I think he gets a little too much love from the community in NBA. But I like to hear your number 6 guy now for sure.
So this is a guy that I know we talked about him during our NBA 2010s draft, and if you haven't checked that out, check that out. But he is a guy that went undrafted, I believe, but we thought about taking him. And I think if you look at him now this year, he's just super overrated, and I would argue that he might be overrated his entire career. I mean, he's won uh, 3 NBA championships. He's one of the best defenders of the decade, so you really have to take that into account.
Oh,
But you look at him this year, and even last year, he's averaging under 8 points or lower a game, around 7 assists, around 7 rebounds. Not great, and it's Draymond Green for me. And people are like, "Oh, Draymond Green, he's coming back. You know, next year the Warriors are going to be good because Draymond Green is back. Let's go." And it's like the Warriors are going to be good next year because Curry and Thompson are back. They're not going to be good next year because Draymond Green is back because in the playoffs he can get himself in shape and he's going to be good. But just look at the offensive numbers. I mean, the defense is still there for the most part. But again, if you look at advanced stats a little bit, it has steadily decreased more and more over the last few years. He's still a really good defender, but not as great as he was. I think a lot of that just due to age. I think he was a byproduct of how good of that culture was in Golden State, but he also was a big reason for it because he's a good leader. I feel like he's a good emotional locker room kind of guy, but we're talking strictly on the court production. He's not as good as people think he is, still think he is at least.
yeah, I disagree on this one. I think Draymond Green's a really good player. Yeah, he's definitely declined a little bit since his true prime, but I still think he's a really solid player in this league. He's never really been one of those really good scorers, and I never consider him to be that. But I think he's a really solid all around player, a big time culture guy, a locker room guy. It seems like he's got his teammates' backs for the most part, besides KD. But yeah, you know my thoughts on KD being with the Warriors a couple years ago. But on Draymond, I still think he's a really good defender. He's a great passer. He's just a guy that when he's on the floor, he makes your team better, in my opinion. I think, yeah, Curry and Clay, they're awesome players. I love both of them as players. I think they're both super good and obviously superstars. But I think Draymond is a glue piece that kind of holds a team together. Kind of that him and Andre Iguodala were. I think they were big big time underrated in that championship run. I don't think he's underrated anymore. I think he's properly rated is where I would put him. But I do disagree with you on that one.
Yeah, I still think he's a really good defender, and he's one of those kind of Swiss Army knife kind of guys where they can do a little bit of
Yeah,
everything. And he's never been a scorer, but
no,
with that being said, I mean, all of his stats have steadily decreased over the last few years.
they
If you
have.
look at rebounds, assists, steals, points, um, and also the advanced metrics, like I said, they're not as great as they were a couple years ago when he was arguably the best defensive player in the league. And I still think people, maybe like yourself, are still thinking like he's that player that he was a couple years ago, and I just don't. I don't think he is. He's 30 years old, which I know is really not that old in real life, but in NBA terms, it's getting up there. So I think he could kind of. Maybe he has one really good year left in him. Maybe next year the Warriors make one last kind of championship run. But realistically, I think he's near the end, in my opinion, of being an elite guy. I think a lot of people still think he is.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not there on that, so I do see where you're coming from, and I know it's a pretty popular opinion to say he's overrated. I'm not criticizing you too hard for this take, but I still think he has a couple good seasons left. I think he is kind of nearing the end. He's in like the really back end of his prime. Like he's definitely falling out of it within the next couple of years, but I think he's still got a couple quality years left of basketball. I think he's going to be a mainstay for this team if they do make another playoff run. But we'll see. You could be right there.
Yeah, I think he's a very divisive player among NBA fans and experts. It's like people either think that he's still a top option, or people still think that he's just washed up. There's really no in between. I feel like he's pretty divided. He's a very divided player among NBA experts and stuff. But who's your next guy?
It's definitely fair. All right, so my next guy, this is gonna start. This is gonna start kind of a run of hot takes here, and I'm gonna start it with a guy that I don't think you're gonna have on your list because he is a very good player. Coming off of a super tough injury, he's still a really good player. I'm not saying he's not that, but I feel like this guy should be a lot better with the tools he have, and I think he's a super skilled player. It's Kristaps Porzingis for me. I think he is a, a lot. I think he's really overrated because he's number 5 on my list, but I just feel like he should be super good, man. I do think he's unbelievably talented, but I don't think he uses it to the best of his ability. And he's also a horrendously bad passer, too. I think he had 1 point something assists last year, which is absolutely terrible. And you feel like you kind of see him. He looks like a playmaker, just kind of all over the floor, but he's really not that. He's mostly just a scorer on offense. So I think he's a little not a lot overrated in that regard. He's a good shooter, obviously, and he's still a really good player. But I don't think he belongs in that group of elite options. He's definitely a good second option for Dallas, and he's coming off the injury. Like I said, I'm sure he can definitely be better than he was this year. But I don't think he's a very good passer. I don't think he's a great defender either. And with that skill set, I don't know. I think he's overrated.
Yeah, he would have been in my top 15. He was in my honorable mentions list. I think he was one of the last guys that I took out to dwindle it to 10, for pretty much all the reasons that you said. I mean, the injuries are a definite thing with him. I mean, he averaged almost 10 rebounds a game this year, which is pretty nice. But outside of this year, his highest average was around 7 rebounds, which isn't great for a big
Right.
guy.
He should be
Um,
getting a ton of boards for how big he is. He should be getting like 14 a game for how he's just massive. He's just a
and
tall dude.
it's shocking to think this, but he's only 24 years old, which is really
It's true.
weird because it feels like he's been around the league for like 10 years now. Um,
Right.
I think just because he was in New York and everything in New York is just blown out of proportion. But he's not a great assist guy, not a great playmaker. He's not. I mean, we saw it in New York. He can't really be a number one guy. I think, especially in
No.
today's NBA. He's a decent shooter though. He shoots around 35% from three, which is pretty good for a big guy.
Yeah.
But and I think we kind of saw, because I have him on my fantasy basketball team, and he really was starting to kind of blossom there right before the suspension and
Right.
play happened. And I think maybe he was starting to kind of recover from those injuries. So that's ultimately why he didn't make my list. But I agree. I think he is a little bit overrated, at least for right now. And I think a large part of that is because of the fact that he was in New York. And if you play for New York or Los Angeles, you are instantly a superstar, like I mentioned earlier with Alex Caruso. So,
that's that's for sure. All right, why don't you jump into your number 5 guy?
all right, I'm number 5 guy. So, producer John is not going to like this because it's on his personal
Oh,
favorite
you're I
team,
know.
the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I actually was gonna put D'Angelo Russell on this list, But then I thought to myself, I looked at his stats and I was like, not as bad. And I feel like he's properly rated because he had all that crap that happened with Nick Young in Los Angeles, and Iggy Azalea and him recording and Snapchat and all that crap. We don't have to get into that again, but I feel like he's not overrated because of all that stuff happened. But the guy that did make my list, that is a member of the Minnesota Timberwolves, is Mr. Karl Anthony Towns. Now, of course, before I start talking about him, thoughts and prayers go out to him because his mom passed away recently because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, of course, thoughts and prayers. But when you look at it from strictly a basketball perspective, this is a guy who, when he came into the league, he was 18 points a game. Now he's at 26 points a game. But after his rookie season, he was 25 points a game, and he really hasn't improved at all since then. Assist, he's about 2 to 4 assists, not great. Rebounds, 10 to 12 rebounds. He just hasn't improved, and people think that he's going to be this alpha dog, superstar, can lead the Minnesota Timberwolves to the promised land. I think on a good team, he's a second or third option, and that's just my personal opinion. I don't think he has that alpha dog mentality. He just wants it, and he's going to go out there and he's going to get it. And if you look at the advanced stats, I know I keep bringing up advanced stats, but look at the advanced stats. Defensive plus and plus, defensive box plus minus is below one and negative in some years as well. So he's not a great defensive player. Yeah, he's a great offensive option. Great offensive option for a big guy. I think one of the best. What's his shooting? 3-point shooting. He's over 40% pretty much every year of his career. Legit 3-point shooter. But I think the way people rate him, and I see Chris is not shaking his head no because he thinks that he's super good, but people think that he's going to be this guy that's going to lead the Minnesota to the promised land, and then he's like the second coming of Kevin Garnett. Kevin Garnett was a amazing player offensively and defensively. Karl Anthony Towns is not that guy. He's a really good offensive player, but he really hasn't improved that much since his first couple years in the league, and he's proven time and time again that he can't lead the Timberwolves really to anything. I mean, for God's sakes, he had Jimmy Butler, who was one of the best players in the league, and they were able to make it to the A seed. And when Butler went down with an injury, people, sorry, I know Chris, you wanted to say something, but I got to say this real quick. People forget that when Jimmy Butler went down with an injury that year, that one year he was in Minnesota, the Wolves were like a top, I think 4 or 5 seed. Butler goes down with an injury. The Timberwolves instantly just fall apart with Towns as the number one option, and it results in them being an 8 seed, and they got blown out by the Rockets in the first round. So, and then of course Butler leaves, and then Towns again. The Timberwolves are a laughing stock in the Western Conference and in the NBA as a whole. So he just doesn't have that alpha dog mentality for me. And Chris, I will now let you have the floor.
Yeah. I 100% disagree with this. I actually I do really like Karl Anthony Towns. It's a full disclosure here. I'm a big fan of him as a player. I do the one thing I do agree with you on is that he's an average defender. That's for sure. But he's not horrible defensively. Like guys like Trey Young, he's not quite in that tier of just awfulness as defensively. I think he's right around the league average. But he's so good offensively. He shoots over 40% from three, and I do think he could be an alpha dog. I know they haven't had the greatest record, but I think that's more of a product of just how bad the T Wolves organization. I don't think it's a Karl Anthony Towns problem. I think he's a really good player, and maybe he doesn't give his effort 100% of the time. He's kind of inconsistent in that, kind of like Drummond. But when he does, he's so much better than Drummond. He spaces the floor out really well. He's a boards machine. He gets offensive rebounds. He can score from anywhere on the floor. Better than which is going to be my next guy in the second. I'm excited to hear your opinion on. But this is kind of a guy compared these two, but I don't think Karl Anthony Towns is overrated at all. I think he's the second best center in the NBA. He's a very good player. So I
Wow.
couldn't disagree more.
I mean, second best center in the NBA really isn't saying much in today's NBA because there's really not a lot of great
Yeah, that's
centers.
fair.
And
That is
I will
fair.
say
That is
this. I
definitely
mean,
fair.
we just got done talking about Andre Drummond a few minutes ago. You look at his advanced defensive stats, Karl Anthony Towns's, they're not too dissimilar to Andre Drummond's advanced defensive stats.
Yeah,
And
but
we just
he's
got
so
done
much
talking
better
about
offensively, though.
yeah, he is a lot.
That's what
He's
it
good offensively, but again, I go back to Minnesota's a crappy team, and somebody's got to score. And we go back to the whole Trey Young thing and all this stuff. And I just am not super crazy about Karl Anthony Towns. I think he's a really good offensive player, but outside of that, I don't know. And I go back to I don't think he's got that alpha dog mentality. I mean, we've seen it. He's got Jimmy Butler on his team. Jimmy Butler goes down with an injury. Instantly, they fall off a cliff and almost don't make the playoffs. And I don't know. I just with Towns, I think if I know there's just like this suspicion that him, D'Angelo Russell, and Devin Booker are going to team up and make a super team. If that happens, I think that of course, they're going to be a really good team. But I don't think he can lead a team by himself. I don't think he's like some of these other guys that we see that can lead the team by themselves. A lot of people think that like yourself that he's a top center in the game, and I just don't, a top player in the game, and I don't see it. I just don't see it because he just really hasn't improved that much. Doesn't have that alpha dog mentality, and he's really good offensively, but doesn't. It's empty calorie stats. That's just what it is.
Yeah, I couldn't disagree more with you, man. Yeah, it's gonna kind of show with the rest of my list to why the Timberwolves haven't been good, and I don't think he's the reason why. I think it's been some of the surrounding cast, the coaching staff, the ownership. I think it's all a mess there for sure, and I think he's been the one steady contributor there. He's been really. I think he's actually improved a pretty decent amount since his rookie season this year. He's just such a good shooter, man. I don't know. I really can't get over how good of a 3-point shooter he's been the last couple seasons. He's one of the best, if not the best, center in terms of 3-point shooting here. I really like that aspect of his game. He does average over 25 points a game. It's very impressive. But I guess I can kind of move into my next guy because this is a guy that I love. I love comparing these two guys, and I am a avid hater of this player because he is the reason this team can't take off. It's Joel Embiid for me. I just don't think he's even close to as good as a guy like Karl Anthony Towns. He is a very good player. I will admit that for sure. I think he probably still the third best center in the league, but he's just not the superstar people view him as. He's always injured. It's just really he's inefficient. He demands a high usage rate every single season. He's not a passer. He's a very good face up and low block four, and he could also shoot the ball or five. That's my bad on that. But I just when you compare him to Cat, he's less efficient. He averages less points per game than Cat. You can argue he's a better slasher. He's definitely a better defender than Cat. I'll give him that. But offensively, I'd much rather have a guy like Karl Anthony Towns. And with that system built around Ben Simmons and Embiid, I think Embiid is 100% the problem there. I don't think it's Ben Simmons at all. And he may be on your list. I have no idea how you feel about Ben Simmons, but that's a guy I don't think is overrated at all. I think he's a very, very good player. And once Embiid leaves and they throw somebody else in there that kind of fit the system a little better, I think this is a team that can make a really nice run deep into the playoffs.
I 100% agree with everything you just said because my next
Wow.
player was going to be Joel Embiid. He was my number 4 guy on my
Yeah,
list.
number four. Yep.
Um, for everything that you just said, I mean, the injuries, like with Towns, I said people think he's a top tier center, and I just don't think he is. With Embiid, people think he's
I
like a
do.
legitimate MVP candidate every
The best
year.
center in the league and a perennial MVP candidate. That's 100% right.
And I just don't see it. I mean, last year, of course, he had a monster year, 27 points, so 27 and a half points, 13.6 rebounds, only 3 assists, which isn't great, but he's a big guy, so he's not going to distribute that much. And he almost averaged 2 blocks a game, which is good. But then you look at the games played; he hasn't played more than 64 games in
Right.
any of his first 4 seasons, and his first 2 seasons where he didn't even play because he injured his foot. So
Injuries.
it's just a big concern for me. And the thing with Embiid is, oh well, he's a really good player, but you have to deal with the injuries. But he's still a really good player, and I'm just like, those things don't go hand in hand. I feel like it's like I feel like you take everything into account, right? And if
Right.
you can't say he's an MVP candidate when he's only playing 60 games a year because of the injuries. I get it, but I don't know. It just doesn't really do it for me. Um, like you said, he is a good defender. Even that though. I don't think he's as great as people think he is, but he is still a pretty good defender. Good block machine. Offensively, I 100% agree with you too with the Ben Simmons take. Is that a lot of people think Ben Simmons is overrated, but like there are so many people that talk about how can't shoot the three ball over and over and over again. And I think it almost makes Ben Simmons a little bit underrated because he's a good
Me too.
defender, good distributor, good rebounder. He's a good all around player. The only thing he can't do is shoot. And with Embiid, it's just people just think he's like this amazing player, and he's not. And also, people think that he's a really good 3-point shooter. He's really not. I mean, his career high in 3-pointers was 37%, around 37%. But
Which is fine.
that was his first full year, and of course for him, full year is like 30 games. And after that first year, though, he hasn't topped out over 34%, which is still pretty good for a big man. But people think that he's like this super good 3-point shooter, and he's pretty league average, slightly below league average.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a bunch of very good points there, Drew. I'm glad we both had him at 4. This is a guy I was really this might have been the top guy that I kind of circled him. I was really hoping you'd agree with him because I kind of wanted to trash him together because he is a very good player. Don't get me wrong on that. When he's on the floor, he's a very good player. He's definitely top 20 player in the league, and he is the third best center, which is also not saying much because I think the center position is weaker than ever in the NBA. I think it's a very weak position. But kind of looking, we didn't really touch on this. He isn't just not a locker room guy either. I feel like he goes at his teammates a lot. He says a lot of stuff. People think he's really soft, which is a very valid statement. I 100% agree with it because I think he's one of the softest players. I think he's Charmin soft in terms of his emotional his emotional stability is just not there, and I think he's going to continue. You're going to continue to see people defend him and people hate on him like me and Drew are. But yeah, I'm fully on board with him being one of the most overrated players in the NBA. I honestly wish I would have put him higher on my list.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I just think people think he's this superstar player, and he's just not. Like, I mean, I think on the floor, when he's on the floor, yeah,
He's
but
borderline that, but he's not that. He's never on the floor, so you definitely have to take that into consideration. He's had some tough injury problems. I also think he's very soft in the injury department, where he's like, I'm hurt, I can't play or whatever. I can't play
yeah,
through an injury like other guys do.
and I don't
Yeah,
fault him for that completely because Philadelphia definitely wraps him in bubble wrap, and like if he's like, I think I'm kind of sore, they're like, okay, you're sitting on the bench for the next 2 weeks. Like that's kind of how Phil. So that's I don't blame him completely for that, but you also brought up a good point that he is kind of a distraction. It does kind of worry me when it
big
seems like
time.
he's not 100% into the game. He doesn't. Going back to that alpha dog mentality that I mentioned with Towns, it seems like he maybe doesn't have that completely, which is an issue. And I think that if I know there's a lot of debate, and we could probably do a whole episode on who should the Sixers keep, Simmons or Embiid, because it seems like if the Philadelphia really wants to take that next step, they're gonna have to get rid of one of those two guys.
And
Um,
then build around the other one.
and I think
Right.
that Embiid is the guy that they should get rid of, not just because of the injuries, but also because I think Simmons is
Fits the
just over.
system better.
Yeah, he fixed this NBA better than Embiid does. Even though he can't shoot, which of course is a big deal in today's NBA, but Simmons can still do everything else at a high level.
I 100% agree with that, Drew, man. That's a good take for sure. Let's get into my number 3 guy here. Zach LaVine, man. I think he is criminally overrated. I know you kind of mentioned him earlier in the pod. I think he's vastly overpaid. I think he's all he is a flashy scorer. Just so many empty stats from him. I know he plays for a bad organization in Chicago. But I don't think he's that upper echelon shooting guard. I really just or you can consider him a point guard, I guess, if you want, but he's not a very good playmaker. He's also not very efficient either. I don't know. He's a bad defender. Yeah, obviously he's a good scorer, but I think he's overrated in that regard. It's kind of a case of somebody's got to score the ball, kind of how Trae Young is, but I think he's way more overrated than Trae Young as a player. I don't think he's even close to that level. And I know you said he kind of got, you were kind of comparing him to Middleton when you were talking about the All Star game. I think Middleton is vastly superior to LaVine in that, and basically every single part of the game.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I rescind my take earlier about Zach LaVine being in the same tier as Chris Middleton because he's not. I mean, if you look at the stats, like he's better than Middleton and probably deserved to be on the All Star team, and that's more kind of what I meant. But you kind of dig deeper into the stats. He's a liability on defense, and it's a
Oh
classic
yeah,
case of
he's so bad defensively.
somebody needs to score the ball. And then he also kind of has a little bit of that. Aaron Gordon thing where like he's a super exciting player and he can dunk a lot and people think okay well he's like a top tier NBA guy and he's really not. I
Right.
mean, of course he averaged 23 points a game last year and 25 and a half points a game this year. He's a really good 3-point shooter. I mean 38% and 37% last year. I mean that's pretty good.
That's not
um,
bad.
it's not like probably like top of the league, but it's above average for sure.
Yeah.
Um, and assists and rebounds, he's got about 4 for both of those categories. Not a whole lot there. About a steal and a half isn't terrible, but like I said, he's not a great defender. I'll be honest. When I was comparing Middleton earlier, Zach LaVine was just the first guy that popped in my head, and that's why I said him. Um, so I'm not. I don't really entirely disagree with this take, Chris, because I think he is a little bit overrated
All right.
because
That's
of a
good.
lot of the same reasons why Aaron Gordon is overrated.
And this is kind of a last second point I'm making about LaVine right here is that his assist to turnover rate is horrendously bad. 4.2 to 3.4 that's really bad. That's it's just that's almost inexcusable for a guy that's supposed to be the alpha dog here. I don't think he'd be a pretty good second option on most teams. I'm not saying he's a bad player by any stretch. He's definitely a borderline all star player. I just don't think Levine is that he's that upper echelon guard. I think he's in that like third tier of guards. I think he's worse than CJ McCollum. I'd much rather have CJ McCollum than him. And even guys like Bradley Beal, like obviously he's better, but like I feel like they kind of get the same amount of attention. I don't know. I'm not really big on Zach Levine's game.
I mean, personally, I like Zach Levine a little bit more than CJ McCollum for all the points I said earlier about CJ McCollum. But you're right. Like Levine is often put in that category with like Bradley Beal and even like Devin Booker, who I'm not sure how you feel about Devin Booker, but Devin Booker is one of my favorite players. I think he's a lot better than Zach
Yeah, I like him
Levine.
too.
And Booker's in a very kind of similar situation as Levine,
But
but
he's a
you can
lot
also
better
see
player.
Booker's a better distributor, not a great defender, but I think still a little bit better than Levine.
Levine's
Yeah,
really bad
and Levine, I
defensively.
think he's a good player, but I just think people like you said, people put him in like that top tier of the NBA, just because he's a big name because of the success he's had in the dunk contest. Um,
Right.
but when you look at just like a pure basketball player, I don't think he's as good. I think he's still above average, above league average in the league.
Yeah.
But he's
Oh,
like
easily by a considerable amount.
if the Bulls were good, he'd be like a second or third option, I think, on a good Bulls team. Not the alpha
Yeah.
dog.
No.
Um,
Yeah. That's kind of my take on him as well. But you can jump into your number three guy as well.
So my number three guy was actually Trey Young. We already kind of went in depth about him a little bit earlier. So he was my number three guy, for just because I think he's still young, but people put him in like that top tier of the NBA point guards. I just don't think he's reached that yet because for a lot of the reasons, like all the other guys on this list, empty calorie stats, and yeah. So I'm gonna jump into my number two guy now, since I already talked about my number three guy, and it's a guy who has made a lot of headlines here the last few weeks. Arguably one of the most controversial figures in the NBA, and that's Kyrie Irving. Now, regardless of what you think about what he said, I mean, in my opinion, I feel like that what he said about like the NBA's restart, specifically about the impact it might have on the current Black Lives Matter movement. I think it needed to be said, and I think a lot of people kind of give Irving a lot of crap because he said
Yeah.
that stuff about the world is flat, and now everyone thinks that he's just a moron. I think what he said about the NBA restart needed to be addressed, so I give him full props for that. But when you look at him strictly from a basketball perspective, on the court, in the locker room, I think he's a little bit overrated. I mean, people put him in the same tier as guys like LeBron, guys like who are. I know James Harden was on your list earlier, Chris, but people put him in that Harden category, that Curry category. And when you look at his stats, especially since he left Cleveland, he's just not really there. Um, he's only, I mean, his 2 seasons in Boston, he played about 60 games. This year, even though it was a shortened season, he only played 20 games. He was pretty much out the entire year for Brooklyn this year. And you look at the stats, the counting stats. I mean, he's got 24 points a game, 23 points a game, 27 points a game, really good numbers. Assists, about 5 to 7 assists per game each of those 3 years, and between 4 and 5 rebounds a year each of those 3 years as well. He's also a really good 3 point shooter, between 39 to 40% all 3 of those seasons as well. But you look at the locker room, not a great locker room guy, not a good leader. I mean, that was firmly on hand when he in his 2 years in Boston, was when he went down with an injury, and Tatum and Brown and that team led them to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals, and they could have realistically beaten LeBron and the Cavs that year. And then last year, Kyrie comes back and just absolutely destroys that team, and in the locker room took everyone's confidence, was saying stuff in the media, just a mess. And then he did the same thing this year and got Kenny Atkinson fired from the Nets, who I think Kenny Atkinson is a really good coach, but Kyrie's just got this super kind of diva mentality, and I think he thinks he's a lot better than he really is. And I think the greater NBA community thinks he's a lot better than he really is because he's just never on the court. And defensively, he's not a great player. Doesn't always have the effort on either end of the floor. And I think he's a little bit overrated.
Oh yeah, that was a nice rant about Kyrie Irving, and I can definitely agree with some of the aspects of him off the court. I don't think he's an overrated player in on the court though. I think he's a top 5 point guard, probably the number 5 guy in my opinion. But no, I will agree that if you're putting him in the conversation of LeBron and those guys, even Curry and even Harden, I definitely think Harden's a lot better than him. Then you're crazy. Then you're overrating him. But I haven't heard that a whole lot, so I will disagree with you on that. I think Irving's a very good scorer. He's also probably the best ball handler in the entire NBA, in my opinion. I think his dribble moves are incredible. I think he's a really good passer. I mean, you said what 4 rebounds for a guy of his stature. I think he was what 6'1", 6'2". That's not too bad. I would take 4 rebounds from that. And he's a pretty good shooter. He's not the greatest 3-point shooter in the league, but I think when he's on the floor and he's motivated, he's a really good player. And I am excited to watch him and KD play together. I'm hoping they can mesh together because I don't really love either player in terms of just like I'm not really a big fan of either one of them, but together I kind of want to see if the chaos can kind of just die down. They can have some calmness in the locker room together because they're both kind of crazy. But it could go really well for them next year. I am very excited. That's one of the things I'm most excited for heading into next season is Kyrie and KD playing together.
I just think that a lot of people think that he's like a super duper star, and in my opinion, he's just not. I mean, you can even look at a lot of it. I know it's a lot of it's just popularity, but I mean, he almost got voted into the All Star game this year, and like I said, he barely played, and
Yeah, that's true.
it's just like people think he's this like legit superstar guy, and he's just not, in my opinion. I mean, he's a good shooter, he's a good scorer, and yeah, he does do a little bit of assist and rebounds, especially for a guy of his size, but um, not great defensively. And I think the fact that you just mentioned that you're worried about like the chaos and all that stuff, the fact that you have to be worried about that kind of stuff, I think kind of just supports my point that he is a little bit overrated because if he was really a super duper star, I don't think you really need to have to worry about what he's going to say in the locker room, what he's going to say off the court, who he's going to call out on the media. I mean, he's just not to be mean, but he's just kind of a walking circus. And I think a lot of people try to kind of ignore that because um, they think he's really good on the basketball court, but I just don't think he's as good as maybe you think and maybe a lot of other people think because the injuries are definitely a concern as well. I mean, I know I kind of mentioned the last couple seasons, but prior to that, he's only played over 70 games 3 times in his career, which is
Yeah.
definitely a concern for him. And I just don't think he's as good as people think he is.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely make some interesting points. I think he's maybe mildly overrated, I would say, but he wasn't really a guy that crossed my mind in terms of like players that even would have came close to my list. Yeah, I would say he errs more on the side of overrated than underrated. But for me, he's around that properly rated kind of area where I think he's a back end top 5 point guard.
Yeah, I think he's probably more like the low half of the top 10, in my
Oh wow,
opinion. And I think people think that he's like yourself, think that he's like top three, top five. So
wow.
um, yeah, I just don't love him, especially his last few years. I just don't think he's also pretty clutch, but I feel like the leadership and the really the on the court production just doesn't lead him to be in that same super duper star category that a lot of people want to place him in.
You know what? That's definitely fair, man. I'm gonna go ahead and jump into my number two guy, and this is kind of this man was a mainstay for this team, and a big reason why I don't think Carl Anthony Towns is overrated at all is Andrew Wiggins is my number two guy. I think he's god awful. Let's just be honest, man. I think this dude is he probably should be my number one guy, but I'm really excited to talk about him as well. My number one dude, it's gonna be a lot of fun, but Wiggins has been the same player since he got drafted. He hasn't gotten any better. People are saying this man's the next LeBron. This man's the next LeBron. He's gonna be so good. Yeah, 19 points a game. Yeah, that's really incredible. Yeah, he's so well rounded with his two rebounds and 2 assists every single season. Yeah, that's incredible. He's probably the most league average offensive player like ever. I think he shoots his career shooting percentage is around 44%. His 3-point percentage is at like 36, 37. Whatever. That's fine. But for a guy that's supposed to be pride himself in his scoring and offensive side of the ball, 19 to 21 points a game isn't anything to write home about. And this is a guy I just think is well outside the top 50 in terms of overall players. I think he's a third to fourth option. Like with the Warriors, probably the fourth, maybe even the fifth option on the team. He might do all right there with around 15 a game and maybe not getting as many shots and maybe he'll be a little bit more efficient. But he's just we know what he is at this point in his career. He's played what 6, 7 seasons. He's been the same exact player all 7 of them. The same boring player, just no fun to watch. Doesn't do anything exceptional. And there's a big tear, as you can tell by my emotions. There's a big tear break between him and Levine. I think he's so unbelievably overrated.
Yeah, so he was actually in my honorable mentions. He didn't make my list
What?
because I feel like that the tide is kind of turned with him is that we all kind of collectively have kind of just accepted the fact that he's not a great basketball player. I think a couple years ago he was super overrated because everyone's like he's the next, like you said, he's the next LeBron. But I feel like just listening to some podcasts, listening to some art, reading some articles in preparation for this, it feels like everyone's kind of in agreement that he's just not a good player anymore. So I feel like he's kind of not as overrated as maybe people that still are just on the Wiggins
Yeah.
Island and just
Oh,
love
I
this
sure
guy.
do. Yeah, one of my
So
friends says that he could be a top 20 player. So yeah, that's right there is a prime example. Why I'm not gonna say his name. You know who you are.
yeah. So I guess just in
Ridiculous.
terms of the people that I've interacted with that are maybe not crazy and say that he's going to be a top 20 NBA player, they've definitely kind of collectively been like, well, he's just not that good anymore. So that's why he ultimately left my list because I feel like he's not as overrated as he was a couple years ago. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think if we end up doing like a most disappointing players of all time, I think Andrew
He'd be
Wiggins
my number one.
definitely on that list. I mean, I remember back when I was, I think I was in middle school, and I remember I was reading articles and watching videos of when he was like at Kansas, and they were like, Andrew Wiggins is the next superstar player. And you look at him now, and it's just like he never reach that potential. And it's really disappointing. But ultimately, I chose to leave him off my overrated list because I feel like, at least aside from your one friend, Chris, at least for me, the people I've interacted with are very much like, yeah, Wiggins just isn't. He's a decent scorer, but doesn't really do a whole lot else. And is on a good team like the Warriors, he's best suited for like a third or fourth role.
Yeah, I mean that might be true, but yeah, to even I mean he did. To be fair, my friend, he did adjust his he adjusted it and he kind of dropped him. I think to top 30, top 40, but even that's still kind of outrageous to me.
Yeah,
I just don't think he's talented. I think he is. I do think he's still overrated because he's not the only. I will say he's not the only one I've talked to that thinks he's still a really good player. And whether you're a T Wolves like our producer John, T Wolves fan like our producer John is or not, I think it's just clear to see that he just wasn't a right fit for that team, and he's not a fit to be a second or even third option for me. I think he's fourth, fifth option. He can be all right.
yeah, I think he could be a third option because he is a decent scorer. But as we saw with Minnesota, I mean, as we saw with Minnesota, that's a good point. I mean, with when Jimmy Butler was there, I mean, I think that was the year. No, that wasn't the year because he averaged 23 points a game one year, which is not bad. But that was his highest scoring average. But he could be a decent third option for a good Minnesota team. But going back to my Karl Anthony Towns talk that I said earlier, Wiggins just has not improved at all from when he
Wow.
first came into the league. And as I think Towns is probably better suited for a second or third role because as we saw when he was the first role, the Minnesota really didn't do that much until Jimmy Butler came. I think Wiggins is not suited for the number two guy role. He's more suited for the number three or four role, which kind of suited him pretty well when Jimmy Butler was there in Minnesota. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens with him in Golden State here in his first full year next year because I think he could have a relatively decent season.
Yeah. Why don't you jump into your number one guy? I'm excited to hear who you got here.
So this number one guy, so I'll be honest, Chris, I lied because this guy, you asked me a few minutes ago, was it this guy? And I said no, it wasn't this guy, but really it was this guy. Um, he is, I know, your favorite player, one of your favorite, maybe your second favorite player in the league, and that's Luka Doncic. For me,
You're a joke.
going back to the Trey Young talk I said earlier, um, people treat Trey Young like he's a top end point guard in this league, right? Right from the get go. Luca, he does the same thing. I mean, people are like, "Oh, he's as good as LeBron. He's on this top 10 tier, whatever." I think he's a top 10 player in the league, top 15 player in the league for sure, easily, obviously. And I think he's going to be a really good player for years to come. But right now, if we're looking at the stats from right now, we look at his first 2 years in the league, he is really good to start the year, and then he just kind of tails off. That's just how he is. And yeah, 28 points a game, 8 assists a game, almost 10 rebounds a game. That's amazing numbers. And I'm not saying that those aren't amazing numbers. But if you ask anybody on the street, hey, is Luka Doncic a good 3 point shooter? They'll probably say, yeah, he's a great 3 point shooter. His 3 point percentage is almost 30%.
Yeah, it's not that
That's
great.
not good. And he shoots 9 threes a game. That's ridiculous. His free throw percentage is also 75%, which isn't terrible, but isn't great. If you're a top 10 guy, top tier guy, the guy that everyone thinks that Luca should be and is, I don't think that makes sense. And I don't think I don't think he really deserves that. Now, 2 years from now, will he reach that kind of top tier? I think so because I think he's going to be I think he's a really talented player. I'm not discrediting him for that, but Right now, the way that ESPN covers them, I mean, I know I've mentioned this several times before, but it's like Luka Doncic does a generic step back, and it's literally everywhere on all NBA platforms. It's like, dude, it was just a play. Like, can we calm down? And sometimes, like the one time Luka ripped his jersey in half, I saw that clip. Kid you not, maybe 100 times in 2 days. It's like, who cares? And the amount of coverage this guy gets, and the amount of just people just want to crown him the next LeBron immediately. I mean, I just don't get it. I mean, I'm if you asked a generic general NBA fan who's better, Luca or Giannis, I would tell you that maybe 60% of the people would say Luca.
What?
People that don't really
What?
watch people that don't really watch the NBA and just go off of like the names or whatever, people are like, "Oh yeah, Luca's probably better." Because the
Oh
amount of coverage
no.
Luca gets, it's insane. And I get he's a likable guy. He's kind of chubby and people like that and he's got a funny sounding name, but I don't know. I just don't like it. And he's not a good defender either. He's not a good defender. And I think that true superstar guys need to be good defenders in my opinion. And I don't think he's a true superstar level guy on the court just yet. But like I said, 2 or 3 years down the road, he'll definitely be there.
Yeah, you're high. This is a bad take. This is back to back episodes. Now we're gonna have a massive disagreement. As this list has gone on, your takes have been getting more and more bold, man, and we've been less on the same page as we've gone on. I don't understand how you have a guy that in his second season averages 28.7 points per game on the list while shooting a respective 46% from the floor. Well, I do agree with you that he's not the greatest three-point shooter. And yes, I did know that because I don't watch ESPN and they're the most trash sports. They're just absolutely trash
It's not
sports
just
content.
ESPN though. It's not just ESPN. It's literally NBA, Slam. Everybody's like Luca. Oh my god! It's like, can we just calm down? Like he's a good player, and I'm not disagreeing that he's not a good player. I'm just saying that right now he's not as good as say LeBron or Giannis, and people are
Okay,
putting him in.
yes, I 100% agree with that. But I don't know. At least from what I'm not a crazy sports talk follower, so I guess maybe you have a little bit more of a say in this. But I really haven't seen anyone put him in that tier. I think he's a top 10 to 15 player for sure. I don't think that's arguable. I mean, he did basically carry them to a playoff. At least they're in the playoff hunt right now, as it stands today. And I would say that's almost totally because of him, because I think Kristaps is a very overrated player, like I said earlier. Um, so I don't think this team has a crazy talented roster. You compare him to Trey Young, but I think he is a better defender than Trey Young, and I think he does a lot more on the floor than Trey Young does, besides just throw up a ton of shots. And yes, like you said, not a very good shooter, and people do kind of love to drink the
Overrate him,
Kool Aid of how
overrate the
awesome his
fact
step
of how
back
good of a
jumper
shooter he
is.
is.
Yeah, they love to drink that Kool-Aid of how awesome of a step back jumper he has. But I guess I am on board where he's very fun to watch for me. I'm not gonna sit here and say his step back is the most unheard of move in the league, but I think he makes a lot of plays that go unnoticed on the floor. I think he's a really good passer. He gets a lot of rebounds. I think he gives his best effort out there every single game. That's the reason why I really root for him. I even have a jersey of his as well. He's one of my favorite players in the league, and I couldn't disagree with you more, man. I think that's a crazy take.
Let me clarify real quick. So you've mentioned there that I think he's just as good as Trey Young. I don't think he's just as good as Trey Young. I think he's a lot better than Trey Young. Um,
Considerably better than
yeah, and when I compare him to Trey Young, I kind of meant how people think Trey Young is like a top tier point guard. They think Luca is a top tier overall player, and I don't think neither of them have really reached that kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I
They've
wouldn't say that. But maybe you're right there, but I still don't. I don't know. I think top 10, 15 player is a very reasonable take for Luca. And if you were to have him inside your top eight, I would be all right with anything above that. Yeah, I would say you're a little bit crazy. So I guess I kind of see that, but I still don't agree with you.
I think this might just be kind of like when we were talking about Wiggins, and I said how the people I've talked to and read about have kind of like he's not super overrated anymore, because I've heard from several people about how Luca is a top three player in the NBA, and in my
Wow.
opinion,
Yeah,
I don't think he is. So that's kind
he's
of where
not.
this take is coming from, and I think he's a top 15 player easily for sure. You can't, like you said, the Mavericks are a playoff team. I mean, he's almost averaging a triple double with almost 30 points a game. I mean, that you can't deny that. Um, but at the same time, he has kind of tailed off here for the second year in a row. He hasn't been as good in the second half of the season as he was in the first half. That's what happened last year too. Definitely raises some concerns a little bit. And like he's still a young player. Like he's not even 21 years old. And is he 21 yet? Uh,
I
yeah,
don't believe so.
I think he's still 20 years old, and I he's still got tons of time to improve, and I think 5 years down the road he realistically will be a top three NBA player. But this list is for right now, and in my opinion, right now, Luca is not in that top tier, top three NBA echelon of guys with guys like LeBron and Giannis, and the amount of media coverage he gets. And I get he's young and he's an exciting player to watch and he's likable, but I just don't really see it yet. And I mean, obviously, I see it. I see the potential, but I just don't really think he deserves that amount of kind of credit yet to be a superstar guy. But I think eventually he definitely will be.
All right, I'm gonna jump into my number one guy, and this is actually a guy you mentioned before. I don't think you're gonna totally disagree with me on him because you said you left him off your list, but this is a player I don't even think we and you have even talked about together, and this is a player that John is gonna absolutely disagree with. It's deloading for me. D'Angelo Russell. I think he is so unbelievably overrated. I think he is objectively one of the worst defenders in the league. He is ultra inefficient scoring. His true shooting percentage is only 53%. The league average is 56%. So he is by definition a below average offensive player. And everyone likes to, you know, ride his coattails saying he's really good offensively. It means he's a top 10 point guard. No, he's not. He's not even a top 20 point guard. This man is so overrated. I am sick of the love he gets. I think he is I think he is a below average starting point guard in the NBA. That's how far I'm willing to go with this take. I think he is unbelievably overrated. And like I said, I really haven't talked about this with you a lot. I know I've talked about Wiggins in the past, but not really with him. Uh, I've just the more articles I read, the more people I listen to, I hear them say he's top. I've heard multiple people say he's in the top 10 of point guards, including a friend of mine. Another one, I'll put him on blast. Not a top 10 point guard, not even a top 20 point guard. There are so many guys I'd rather have on my team than him, and I think he's just overrated. That's what it comes down to. Overrated.
So like I said, he almost made my list. I almost actually had him and Towns together as one of my spots because people are like when D'Angelo Russell came back, it was like, or when he got traded to Minnesota, like they were throwing out mixtapes, and it was like, here we go, Minnesota's back, baby, and it was like, all right, let's kind of calm down a little bit. Like this guy had one really good year in 18-19 with Brooklyn. I mean, he averaged 21 points a game, 7 assists a game, almost a steal and a half a game, pretty good numbers. Shot almost 37% from three, and he really was the best player on Brooklyn, and they were a playoff team. So I think you got to kind of respect that. But I don't really know what some of your friends are smoking here, and I don't really know who your friends are. But like, I don't think Russell is in the top 15 or top 10 point guards. That's a little bit ridiculous, and that's definitely a hot take. But I think he's above average, and I have to kind of push back on that kind of take by you, Chris, because I don't think average point guards average 23 points, 7 assists a game like he did this year.
He
Um,
shoots below average from the floor in terms of true shooting percentage. So for me, I see that and I just instantly think of a player that's just he's a ball. I think he's a ball hog. He has absolutely no impact in transition, which is a big deal for me as well. And your point guard needs to be able to push the pace of the floor. He doesn't. All he does is just take really tough shots, and when he makes one of three of them, because he shoots like 42% from the floor every year, people just they just are in awe. They're like, it's kind of like the Luka effect. I know people don't think he's in that tier, but when people see him make that shot, like, oh my god, he's so good. He's incredible. Yeah, he takes them every time. Yeah, he should make one of four of those shots or whatever he's doing. But he's also, I just think his impact on the floor is just, it's so overrated. I think he's so bad defensively. He's not a very good passer. He offers little to nothing from the free throw line as well. He's basically just all he is a difficult shot maker, which he's really not even that crazy at that either. He's not efficient in that regard, and he's also extremely inconsistent. I just for every reason he plays the game of basketball, I think he's overrated. I don't think there's a single aspect of his game that isn't overrated.
I mean, I think it's kind of the same thing with Jamal Murray, like we said earlier, where Jamal Murray's an exciting player, and that's why he's a little bit overrated. And I know you maybe disagree that D'Angelo Russell's not an exciting player, but
He's not.
I think he's clutch, and I think he's kind of fun. He takes some crazy contested shots that go in a lot of the time, which is kind of entertaining. But I think realistically, he's probably better suited for like a second or third role on a good
But he's
team,
been that
and
before.
maybe even shift over to shooting guard. Um, But again, I go back to though the fact that we did see him lead a team to the playoffs last year in Brooklyn. He was, I think, the best player on that team last year, and I think you got to give him credit for that. And he made an All Star team, so I think he's above league average. I don't think he's top 10 or top 15, like I said earlier, because he's not good defensively. But you got to take into account that I don't think he's as bad a passer as you kind of are saying he is. I mean, he still averages 7 assists a game, which is pretty good.
His career average is 5.3 a game. That's nothing to write home about for
But
especially for a point guard. That's I would say it's below league average. Point guard.
he's steadily increased though throughout his career. Aside from this year, he dropped off a little bit. He was at 7 last year, and now he went to about 6.5 this year. But he was 3, 4, 5. Like he's improved every year. But I don't know. Like I kind of said earlier, Minnesota was like, "Oh yeah, here we go. We got deloading in the building. We're gonna go to the promised land." I don't really think Russell's that good of a player, but I think offensively he's a good enough player. If he moves to shooting guard, I think he could even be better. Because he's not a bad 3 point. I know you said his true shooting percentage is not good, which is true, but he's not a
His
bad 3 point.
percentage is only 35%. That's nothing
It's
special. That's
it's
garden
it's
territory.
it's 37% the last few years. Um, which I think has to be noted. And I think he's a decent 3 point shooter. He's definitely not like a league below league average 3 point shooter.
Yeah, he's probably right around average.
I'll be honest, I'm surprised that this is the guy that you're the most passionate that he's overrated. I'll be honest, I had no idea you were so heavily against D'Angelo Russell.
Yeah, like I said, it's been more of a recent acquired taste, I'd say. I didn't really think about him a lot, but I kind of wanted to dive in. Once they made that trade, I wanted to kind of dive back into his numbers. I wanted to see if he'd actually make them a better team, and I really don't think he's going to at all. I think him and Wiggins' impact on the floor are going to be very similar. And, deloading might look a little more pretty in the box score because he takes more shots than Wiggins, and he makes those every once in a while. Yeah, he does make a clutch shot, but I think when you take him enough, like he does, he's always got the ball. He's like always at the top of the league in usage percentage as well, which is another factor to why he always takes that last shot. Every once in a while they're going to go in, and yeah, he did lead. He did lead the Nets to the playoffs, but I don't think the East was anything to write home about, and he didn't really do anything in the playoffs either. So I don't care that he made the playoffs personally.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think that the fact that we've mentioned, I think, two current Minnesota Timberwolves and one previous Minnesota Timberwolf just shows you the problems Minnesota has. I know you're heavily against Karl Anthony Towns' take, but I still stand by it because I think a lot of the kind of questions you're raising about deloading are the same questions that you can kind of raise about Karl Anthony Towns. But
I
I
think Carl
think
Anthony Towns is a much better player though on offense at least.
I honestly think D'Angelo Russell is a much better player than Andrew Wiggins.
Oh yeah, he is. He's a better player than Andrew Wiggins, but he also gets a lot more love than Wiggins, and kind of where that's why I put him over is because Wiggins kind of that post hype guy now. So I will agree with you on that. Where Wiggins isn't, people are kind of starting to realize what he is. Where I think people are like, oh man, now that he's deloading, scoring more points now, he's so much better of a player. But I really don't think he is. If you really look at his numbers, I don't think he's gotten any better. I think he's just taking more shots, and I think he's just a really inefficient player. And I mean, I've said it like 4 different times that he's inefficient, but also, not to mention, I really didn't even talk about that much. He is one of the worst defensive starting point guards in the NBA.
Yeah,
He's definitely, I would say, bottom five in that regard. So, with below average, I mean, I would maybe call him average offensively because, I mean, you probably will disagree with me on that, but like a below average true shooting percentage, really inefficient, but he does make some tough shots. So, I'll give you average on that. And awful defense. I just don't see how he's inside anybody's top 20. I don't get it.
yeah. I don't. I mean, I think he's top 25 in my opinion. For definitely top 30, but top 20, that's a bit of a stretch. I'm definitely,
I,
I think
yeah,
a little bit of a higher D'Angelo Russell fan than you are. Is I just think he's a
I'm not
better
at all.
offensive player than you think. But defensively, I mean, there's no denying he's not a good defensive player, and you can just look at the
No.
advanced stats, and that backs it up completely. But yeah, so I'm like I
Yeah,
said, I'm very surprised.
really? Yeah, I wasn't really for sure putting him at number one, but I kind of wanted to throw a different name out there because I've definitely talked about Wiggins before, so I wanted to make it a little more interesting, and I was hoping we could get a little talking about that. But it was overall a really, I had a really good time talking about our 10 most overrated players. We definitely had some differences, like I said right at the beginning. I assume we were going to have some passionate disagreements, mainly on Carl Anthony Towns, and I would say Zach Levine, Draymond Green, and Luka Doncic as well. That was ridiculous, but it was. I had a lot of fun, man.
I will say that with the Luca take, it seemed like as I started talking about it a little bit more, you kind of were you kind of understood it a little bit more from where I was coming
I
from.
understand what you're saying. I just don't. I don't think he's overrated. I do think people. I will say that I think people do overrate him. So I guess I can see why you have him on the list. Number one's a little too high for me because I think he's too good of a player to be number one for me. He was really good, and I do get some of the crazy hype he gets, but I also don't really follow that quite as much as you do. So we kind of differ on that.
I should say this real quick. I ranked mine in order of like how big their name was.
That's true.
So
That is true.
Luca was a little in terms of like actual how much they're overrated. I think he's probably a little bit lower for sure, but
That's fair.
he's clearly the biggest name on this list.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Any final takes? Any honorable mentions? Any guys? And we kind of touched on them throughout the pod. Some guys that just missed our list. But any additional guys you want to mention real quick?
The only other guy I had on my list was Dennis Schroeder, but I just didn't think he was enough of a good player. I don't think he's that great personally. He's fine off the bench, but I've heard some people say that he's a ridiculously good scorer, and I don't see it. But we don't have to get into it anymore.
I mean, he's the sixth man of the year this year. He took a giant leap this year. He's one of the best, probably the best bench scoring threat this season. I think he
All
was
right.
overrated previous years, but
Yeah,
this
that's
year,
true as well. That's kind of why I left him off the list. He has
he
definitely,
really stepped up.
and that's why he didn't even really come. That was just another guy that we hadn't mentioned before. He probably would have been not even maybe not even my top 15.
All right. Well, yeah. I mean, Chris, you mentioned it. That was a lot of fun. And again, we are the Zone Defense Podcast. Follow us on Spotify, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to us on YouTube. And also, if you haven't checked out already, we've done a ton of NFL episodes the last few weeks. We dove deep into the NFC East and the NFC North, as well as did a NFL 2020 skill position draft. And Chris and I also went back and forth on our QB rankings headed into this season. So check those out if you haven't already. And thanks for listening to this episode. We're Zone Defense, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.